Let me invite you to settle into this moment of quiet peace. Feel yourself sinking deeper into your comfortable space, whether that's your bed with soft pillows cradling your head, or perhaps a cozy chair where you can let your body fully relax. Notice how your breathing naturally begins to slow as you listen to the gentle rhythm of my voice, like waves lapping against a distant shore. The day's worries and busy thoughts are drifting away now, carried off by an invisible tide that takes with it all the tension from your shoulders, your jaw, your hands. Allow your eyelids to grow heavy if they haven't already, and imagine yourself on the deck of an old sailing ship at twilight, where the only sounds are the soft creaking of wooden planks beneath your feet and the whisper of salt-tinged breeze through weathered canvas sails. The air around you is warm and peaceful, filled with the scent of ocean spray and the fading light of a sun that is painting the sky in gentle shades of amber and rose. Our story today sets sail in the year 1485 aboard a magnificent English vessel called the Grace Douillet, where the earliest recorded mention of a ship's bell first appeared in maritime history. Picture this grand ship rocking gently on calm waters, her tall masts reaching toward a sky painted with the soft colors of early evening. The wooden hull creaks in that rhythmic, soothing way that only comes from a well-built vessel, at peace with the sea, while sailors move about their duties with the practiced ease of men who have learned to find their balance on the ever-shifting deck. High above the main deck, secured near the forecastle, hangs a bronze bell that gleams dully in the fading light, its surface worn smooth by countless hands and weathered by years of salt spray and ocean storms. This bell, no larger than a cooking pot, yet infinitely more precious to the crew, represents something far more significant than its simple appearance might suggest. The bell's bronze surface tells stories in its patina, each darkened streak and worn spot marking another voyage across vast oceans where time itself seemed to stretch and bend like the horizon. When you look closely at this ancient time-keeping device, you can almost see the generations of sailors who have depended on its steady voice to mark the passage of their days and nights at sea. The metal was cast in foundries where craftsmen understood that this instrument would become the heartbeat of life aboard ship, where men would learn to measure their existence not in hours and minutes as we do on land, but in the steady progression of bells that divided their floating world into manageable portions of duty and rest. Each ring of this bell would echo across the wooden deck and through the rigging above, carrying with it not just the marking of time, but the comfort of routine and the promise of order in the vast uncertainty of the open ocean. Imagine yourself as one of those early sailors, perhaps a young man who has left his village for the first time to seek adventure on the high seas. The ship beneath your feet represents everything you know of the world now, a floating island of familiar faces and daily routines that provide structure in the endless expanse of water that stretches in every direction. Your life has become governed by the sound of that bronze bell, its voice more reliable than the sun hidden behind clouds or the stars obscured by fog. When the bell rings, once you know that 30 minutes have passed since the last time it sounded, and when it rings twice, you understand that a full hour has elapsed in this strange, new way of measuring time that feels so different from the church bells of your childhood village. The system that governs your days is both simple and profound in its elegant solution to an age-old problem. On land, people could rely on sundials and church bells, on the position of shadows, and the familiar landmarks that marked the passage of time from dawn to dusk. But here, surrounded by nothing but water and sky, such earthbound methods of timekeeping become useless relics of a world left far behind. The ship's bell becomes your clock, your calendar, your connection to the orderly progression of time that keeps human society functioning, even in the middle of nowhere. Each ring carries with it the weight of tradition and the comfort of knowing that somewhere someone is keeping track of the moments that make up your life, ensuring that chaos doesn't overtake the carefully maintained rhythm of watches and duties that keep the ship sailing safely toward its destination. As evening deepens into night aboard your vessel, you begin to understand how the watch system works with the precision of a well-oiled machine. The crew is divided into two groups, called the port and starboard watches, each taking turns at the responsibility of keeping the ship safe and on course during 4-hour periods of duty. When your watch begins, you know you will spend the next 4 hours attending to the endless tasks that keep a sailing ship functioning. Trimming sails, checking lines, watching for other vessels or dangerous weather, maintaining the course set by the navigator. These 4 hours stretch before you like a contained universe, marked at regular intervals by the reassuring sound of the bell that lets you know how much time has passed and how much remains before you can seek the comfort of your hammock below deck. The first ring of the bell comes 30 minutes into your watch, a single clear note that cuts through the night air and tells you that time is passing in its orderly way. There's something deeply comforting about this sound, the way it connects you to every other sailor who has ever stood watch on any ship anywhere in the world. The bronze voice speaks of continuity and tradition, of men who have faced the same challenges you face now and who found comfort in the same steady rhythm of time marked in half-hour increments. The sound seems to hang in the air for a moment before being absorbed by the vastness of the ocean, but its message remains clear. Time moves forward, your watch continues, and all is well aboard this floating world that has become your temporary home. When the bell rings twice, marking the completion of your first hour on watch, you feel a sense of accomplishment that might seem disproportionate to landsmen, but makes perfect sense in the context of life at sea. Each passing hour brings you closer to the end of your duty period, closer to rest, and closer to your destination, wherever that might be. The double ring seems to echo longer than the single ring did, as if the bell itself understands the significance of marking these larger increments of time. You find yourself listening for the sound, even when you're not consciously thinking about it, your body and mind attuned to the rhythm that has become as essential to life aboard ship as breathing or eating. The third hour of your watch is marked by 3 clear rings of the bell, each note distinct and purposeful as it travels across the deck and mingles with the gentle sounds of wind and water. By now you've begun to internalize this strange new way of measuring time, understanding viscerally how different life becomes when your days are divided, not by the rising and setting of the sun, but by the artificial yet comforting rhythm of bronze struck against bronze. The bell's voice has become as familiar as your own heartbeat, a constant companion that provides structure and meaning to days that might otherwise blur together in the endless sameness of ocean travel. As your watch draws toward its close, marked by the approach of that magical 8th bell that signals the end of 4 hours of duty, you begin to understand why sailors throughout history have regarded the ship's bell as something approaching the sacred. This simple instrument represents far more than a timekeeping device. It serves as the soul of the vessel, the voice that speaks order into chaos and provides the rhythm around which all life aboard ship revolves. The bell connects past to present, tradition to innovation, individual to community in ways that seem almost mystical when experienced in the profound solitude of a ship at sea under stars that wheel overhead in their ancient, unchanging patterns. The system you relearning to live by represents centuries of maritime wisdom distilled into its most practical form. Before bells, ships relied on less reliable methods of timekeeping, hourglasses that could be affected by the ship's motion, sundials that were useless in cloudy weather or at night, and the unreliable human tendency to lose track of time when absorbed in demanding work. The bell system solved all these problems with elegant simplicity, providing a method of timekeeping that worked regardless of weather, time of day, or the ship's position on the globe. The sound of bronze carried farther and more clearly than human voices, could be heard over the noise of wind and waves, and required no special skill or knowledge to interpret. When the bell rings 4 times, marking the halfway point of your watch, you pause in whatever task occupies your hands and listen to the sound fade into the night. There's something hypnotic about this moment, the way the 4 clear notes seem to divide your duty period into equal halves, creating a sense of symmetry and balance that feels almost mathematical in its precision. The first half of your watch lies behind you now, already becoming memory, while the second half stretches ahead with its promise of eventually leading to rest and sleep. This midpoint marking feels significant in a way that goes beyond mere timekeeping, creating a moment of reflection and renewed purpose as you settle into the remaining hours of your responsibility to ship and crew. The beauty of the bell system lies not just in its practicality, but in its psychological effects on the men who live by its rhythm. Each ring provides a small sense of accomplishment, a marking of progress through time that might otherwise feel endless and unmarked. The bells break the vastness of ocean time into manageable pieces, creating a structure that allows human minds to cope with the infinity of water and sky that surrounds the ship. Without this artificial division of time, days and nights might blend into an unbearable sameness that could drive men to despair or madness. The bell provides anchor points in time, moments of certainty in an uncertain world where the only constants are change and motion. As you move through your duties during this 4th hour of watch, you begin to notice how the bell's rhythm has synchronized with your own internal rhythms. Your body has learned to anticipate the sound, your mind has adjusted to thinking in half-hour increments, and your sense of time has adapted to this new way of measuring the passage of moments. The bell has become part of you, just as you have become part of the ship's crew, integrated into a system that is larger than any individual, yet dependent on every person playing their role in the great, cooperative effort of sailing across vast oceans toward distant shores. The 5th bell rings as you're checking the set of a sail, and the sound causes you to pause and look up at the stars that fill the sky above your ship. In this moment, you realize how the bell connects you not just to your fellow sailors, but to the cosmos itself, providing a human-scaled rhythm that exists in harmony with the larger rhythms of celestial motion. The stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns the moon traces. Its path across the sky, the tides rise and fall according to schedules set by forces far beyond human control, yet the bell provides a way for mere mortals to participate in these cosmic rhythms while maintaining their own human sense of time and purpose. The sixth bell brings with it a sense of anticipation, for you know that only 2 more rings separate you from the end of your watch and the blessed relief of sleep. Your body has learned to recognize this signal, understanding that the hardest part of your duty period now lies behind you, while only the familiar home stretch remains ahead. There's something deeply satisfying about this progression, the way each bell builds upon the last to create a sense of momentum and purpose that carries you through even the longest and most difficult watches. The sound seems sweeter now, more musical, as if the bell itself shares your anticipation of the rest that awaits. As the 7th bell rings across the quiet deck, you feel the subtle change that comes over the ship as the off-duty watch begins to stir below, decks preparing to relieve you and your shipmates of the responsibility that has occupied the last 3.5 hours of your life. Soon you will climb down into the warmth and relative quiet of the ship's interior, where your hammock awaits with its promise of rest and dreams. The 7th bell is the signal that your time of responsibility is nearly over, that you have successfully completed another watch in the endless succession of watches that will carry the ship safely to its destination. Finally, the 8th bell rings, its 8 clear notes marking not just the end of your watch, but the completion of another perfect cycle in the rhythm that governs life at sea. 8 bells means the end of the watch, the changing of the guard, the moment when responsibility passes from your tired hands to fresh ones, and you are free to seek the rest you have earned through 4 hours of faithful duty. The 8 rings seem to echo longer than any of the others, carrying with them a sense of completion and accomplishment that transforms mere timekeeping into something approaching ritual or ceremony. This is why, in maritime tradition, 8 bells has come to represent not just the end of a watch, but the end of life itself, the final marking of time for those who have completed their longest and most important voyage. The tradition of using bells to mark time at sea stretches back through centuries of maritime history, each generation of sailors adding their own understanding to this ancient practice while preserving the essential wisdom that makes the system work so perfectly in the unique environment of a ship at sea. As you rest in your hammock, gently swaying with the ship's motion, you can still hear the faint sound of the bell above deck, now marking time for the watch that has relieved you. The bronze voice continues its eternal duty, indifferent to who listens, caring only that time is marked and order is maintained in the small floating world that carries you across the vast ocean toward whatever destiny awaits at your journey's end. The history of maritime bells reveals a fascinating evolution from simple, practical necessity to elaborate ritual and tradition. In the earliest days of ocean sailing, ships relied on hourglasses and the observation of celestial bodies to mark the passage of time, but these methods proved inadequate for the precise coordination required to operate a large vessel safely. The hourglass, while more accurate than other early time-keeping devices, suffered from the constant motion of the ship, which could cause the sand to flow irregularly or even stop entirely during particularly rough weather. Celestial navigation, though essential for determining position, could not provide the moment-to-moment timekeeping needed to coordinate watches and ensure that vital duties were performed at the proper intervals. The introduction of the bell solved these problems with characteristic maritime practicality, providing a timekeeping method that was both accurate and reliable, regardless of weather conditions or the ship's motion. The bell's voice could be heard throughout the vessel, penetrating into the deepest parts of the ship, where men might be working in the hold or resting in their quarters. Unlike visual signals, which could be obscured by fog or darkness, the bell's sound carried clearly in all conditions, ensuring that every member of the crew remained connected to the ship's temporal rhythm. This acoustic solution proved so effective that it became universal among sailing vessels, adopted by navies and merchant fleets throughout the world as the standard method of marking time at sea. The casting of ships' bells became a specialized craft, with artisans learning to create instruments that could withstand the harsh marine environment while producing clear, carrying tones that would remain consistent throughout years of service. The bronze used in these bells was carefully alloyed to resist corrosion from salt spray while maintaining the acoustic properties necessary for effective timekeeping. Master bell founders developed techniques for creating instruments that would ring true despite the constant motion of the ship, understanding that a bell whose tone varied with the vessel's motion would be worse than useless for accurate timekeeping. The best ship's bells were prized possessions, often bearing the name of the vessel and the date of casting, serving as both functional instruments and symbols of the ship's identity and purpose. As maritime commerce expanded during the age of exploration, the standardization of bell signals became crucial for international communication and safety. Ships from different nations needed to understand each other's time signals when meeting at sea, leading to the development of universal practices that transcended national boundaries and linguistic differences. The 8-bell system became the international standard, recognized by sailors from England to Spain, from Portugal to the Netherlands, creating a common language of time that allowed vessels from different cultures to coordinate their activities and share information about navigation and weather conditions. The psychological impact of the bell system on sailors' lives cannot be overstated, for it provided structure and meaning to existence in an environment that could otherwise feel chaotic and unpredictable. The regular marking of time created a sense of progress and purpose, breaking the vastness of ocean voyages into manageable segments that could be endured and completed. Each bell represented not just the passage of time, but the accumulation of experience and the steady approach of journey's end, whether that meant reaching a distant port or simply completing another day of life at sea. The bells became companions to lonely sailors, providing a form of communication and connection that linked individual experience to the larger rhythm of ship life. The training of new sailors always included instruction in the bell system, for understanding the ship's temporal rhythm was as essential as learning to tie knots or trim sails. Young men who came aboard without previous sea experience had to learn to think in terms of watches and bells rather than the hours and days that had governed their lives on land. This mental adjustment represented one of the most fundamental changes in becoming a sailor, requiring not just intellectual understanding, but a deep bodily adaptation to new rhythms of sleep, work, and rest. The bell became their teacher, patiently marking time while they learned to synchronize their personal rhythms with the collective rhythm of the ship. The maintenance of the ship's bell was considered one of the most important responsibilities aboard any vessel, for a bell that failed to ring properly could disrupt the entire organization of ship life. The bell was regularly inspected for cracks or damage, its bronze surface polished to prevent corrosion, and its mounting checked to ensure that it would ring clearly, regardless of the ship's motion. The sailor assigned to ring the bell, often the youngest member of the watch, learned to strike it with just the right force to produce a clear, carrying tone that would reach every corner of the ship without being so loud as to disturb those who were trying to rest below deck. The cultural significance of ships' bells extended far beyond their practical function, becoming symbols of maritime life that appeared in songs, stories, and traditions passed down through generations of sailors. The phrase 8 bells came to represent not just the end of a watch, but the end of life itself, as sailors began to speak of death as the final ringing of 8 bells. This metaphor reflected the deep integration of bell time into sailors' understanding of existence, where the rhythm of bells had become so fundamental to their experience that they could not imagine any ending that was not marked by the familiar bronze voice that had governed their days at sea. The evolution of maritime bell traditions continued throughout the golden age of sail, with different types of vessels developing their own variations on the basic 8-bell system. Warships, with their need for precise coordination during battle, developed elaborate bell codes that could communicate complex information about combat readiness and tactical maneuvers. Merchant vessels focused on the efficient movement of cargo adapted the bell system to coordinate loading and unloading operations in port. Whaling ships, with their unique patterns of work and rest dictated by the hunt for their massive prey, created modified bell schedules that could accommodate the irregular demands of their specialized occupation. The construction of larger and more complex vessels during the 18th and 19th centuries led to the development of multiple bell systems, with different bells serving different areas of the ship. The main bell, usually located near the forecastle, continued to mark the passage of watches and coordinate the overall rhythm of ship life. Secondary bells might be installed in the engine room, the galley, or other specialized areas where workers needed to coordinate their activities with the ship's overall schedule. These multiple bell systems created a complex symphony of time that could communicate different types of information to different groups of sailors, while maintaining the overall unity of the ship's temporal organization. The art of bell ringing itself became a point of pride among sailors, with experienced hands taking pleasure in producing perfectly timed sequences that marked the passage of time with ceremonial precision. The rhythm of the bells was carefully prescribed, with specific intervals between individual rings that created distinctive patterns for each time marking. One bell was a single clear ring, but 2 bells required 2 separate strikes with a specific pause between them, creating a rhythm that was unmistakably different from any other time signal. This careful attention to the rhythm of bell ringing reflected the deep respect sailors had for the system that governed their lives, and their understanding that precision in small things was essential for safety and order in the challenging environment of the sea. The influence of maritime bell traditions extended onto land, where coastal communities adopted similar systems for coordinating their own activities with the rhythms of ships coming and going from their harbors. Lighthouse keepers used bells to mark time and signal their presence to ships approaching dangerous coasts. Coastal churches incorporated maritime bell traditions into their own timekeeping practices, creating a connection between the temporal rhythms of sea and land that reflected the interdependence of maritime and terrestrial communities. The sound of bells thus became a unifying element that linked different aspects of life in coastal regions, creating a shared acoustic environment that connected sailors, merchants, and landsmen in a common understanding of time and purpose. The decline of sail power and the rise of steam navigation in the 19th century might have spelled the end of traditional maritime bell systems, but the opposite proved to be true. Steamships, with their more precise schedules and greater coordination requirements, actually increased the importance of accurate timekeeping and expanded the use of bell signals for communication between different parts of the vessel. The engine room, in particular, developed its own elaborate bell code for communicating with the bridge about speed and maneuvering requirements. These new applications of bell technology demonstrated the fundamental soundness of the original system and its ability to adapt to changing maritime conditions while preserving its essential function of coordinating human activity aboard ship. The training of officers in maritime academies always included extensive instruction in bell systems and their proper use. For understanding the temporal organization of ship life was considered essential for effective leadership at sea. Future captains learned not just the technical aspects of bell signals, but their psychological and social significance for maintaining morale and discipline among crews who might spend months or even years together in the confined space of a ship. The bell system provided a framework for organizing work and rest that could prevent the conflicts and disorders that might otherwise arise when large groups of men were forced to live and work together under challenging conditions for extended periods. The international standardization of maritime bell signals became increasingly important as global trade expanded and ships from different nations began to interact more frequently. Maritime law developed specific provisions for bell signals, establishing legal requirements for their use and creating penalties for vessels that failed to maintain proper timekeeping practices. These legal frameworks recognized that accurate timekeeping was not just a matter of internal ship organization, but a crucial element of maritime safety that affected the welfare of all vessels sharing the world's oceans. The bell system thus became embedded in the legal structure of international maritime commerce, giving it a formal status that reflected its fundamental importance to the safe and efficient of global shipping. The technological development of more accurate and reliable bells continued throughout the industrial age, with improvements in metallurgy and manufacturing techniques producing instruments that could maintain their accuracy and tone quality for decades of service in harsh marine environments. The development of new bronze alloys and improved casting techniques created bells that were both more durable and more musical, capable of producing clear, carrying tones that could be heard throughout even the largest vessels. These improvements in bell technology reflected the continuing importance of acoustic timekeeping in an age when other forms of communication and coordination were becoming increasingly sophisticated. The cultural impact of maritime bell traditions extended far beyond the maritime community itself, influencing literature, music, and popular culture in ways that reflected the deep fascination landlubbers felt for the romantic and adventurous life of the sea. The sound of ships' bells became a symbol of adventure and freedom, representing the call of distant shores and the promise of new experiences beyond the horizon. Songs and stories celebrated the bell's voice as the herald of maritime adventure, while poets used the imagery of bells and time to explore themes of journey, passage, and the relationship between human temporality and the eternal rhythms of the natural world. The relationship between maritime bells and the natural rhythms of the ocean reveals one of the most profound aspects of traditional seamanship, where human timekeeping learned to harmonize with the eternal patterns of tide and wind that govern life at sea. As you drift deeper into relaxation, imagine yourself standing at the rail of that ancient vessel, watching the moonlight create a silver pathway across the gently rolling waves, while the ship's bell marks another half hour in its patient, eternal rhythm. The sound mingles with the whisper of water against the hull and the soft creaking of rigging overhead, creating a symphony of maritime peace that has lulled countless sailors into the deep sleep that comes only to those who have learned to trust completely in the rhythm of bell time and the steady progress of their vessel through the vast darkness of the ocean night. The development of specialized bell codes for different maritime situations demonstrates the remarkable adaptability of this simple acoustic system to meet the complex communication needs of life at sea. During periods of fog, when visual signals became impossible and voices could not carry reliably across the water, ships developed elaborate bell sequences that could communicate their position, heading, and intentions to other vessels in the vicinity. These fog signals required precise timing and careful listening, creating a form of maritime Morse code that allowed ships to navigate safely through conditions that would otherwise make travel impossibly dangerous. The skill required to interpret and respond to these complex bell communications became one of the marks of an experienced sailor, representing years of training in the subtle art of acoustic navigation and collision avoidance. The role of the ship's bell in emergency situations reveals another crucial aspect of its function aboard sailing vessels, where the familiar rhythm of normal timekeeping could be instantly transformed into urgent calls for action that every sailor understood without hesitation or confusion. Fire bells rang with a distinctive rapid sequence that immediately brought all hands on deck, while man overboard signals used a different pattern that communicated the nature of the emergency and the required response. These emergency signals were practiced regularly during drills, ensuring that every member of the crew could respond instantly to the bell's urgent voice, even when awakened from deep sleep or distracted by demanding work. The psychological power of these emergency bells lay in their ability to cut through any other activity or thought, commanding immediate attention and action from men whose lives might depend on their speed of response. The influence of maritime bell traditions on the development of land-based timekeeping systems reveals the broader cultural impact of seafaring practices on human civilization as a whole. Coastal cities and towns began to adopt bell schedules that synchronized with the arrival and departure of ships, creating temporal rhythms that connected terrestrial activities with maritime commerce. The great port cities of the world developed their own distinctive bell cultures, with the sound of ship bells in the harbor, mingled with church bells and civic bells, to create complex acoustic environments that communicated different types of information to different segments of the population. Merchants learned to read these bell signals as indicators of commercial opportunity, while workers in ship-related industries used them to coordinate their labor with the rhythms of maritime trade. The scientific study of maritime timekeeping led to significant advances in the understanding of human circadian rhythms and the effects of artificial temporal structures on physical and mental health. Physicians who served aboard long voyages began to document the ways in which bell time affected sleep patterns, work performance, and overall crew morale, contributing to the development of more effective watch schedules that took into account the natural rhythms of human physiology. These early studies of maritime chronobiology revealed that the 4-hour watch system, marked by bells, actually aligned quite well with natural human sleep cycles, providing periods of rest and activity that supported rather than disrupted the body's internal clock. The wisdom embedded in traditional maritime timekeeping thus proved to have scientific foundations that were not fully understood until centuries after the practices had been established through practical experience. The artistic and decorative aspects of ships' bells reflect the deep affection sailors felt for these essential instruments, transforming purely functional objects into works of maritime art that expressed the cultural values and aesthetic sensibilities of the seafaring community. Master craftsmen developed techniques for decorating bells with intricate engravings that celebrated the history and achievements of particular vessels, creating instruments that served simultaneously as timekeepers, artistic objects, and historical documents. The inscriptions on these bells often included the names of ships and their crews, dates of significant voyages, and maritime symbols that connected individual vessels to the broader traditions of seamanship and ocean exploration. These decorated bells became treasured possessions that were passed down through generations of sailors, carrying with them the accumulated history and tradition of centuries of maritime experience. The psychological comfort provided by the ship's bell during long ocean voyages cannot be understated, for its familiar voice represented continuity and stability in an environment where everything else was subject to constant change and uncertainty. The bell's rhythm provided an anchor point for consciousness, a reliable constant that allowed sailors to maintain their sense of time and place even during the most disorienting aspects of ocean travel. During storms, when the ship was tossed by waves and battered by wind, the bell continued to mark time with its steady voice, reminding the crew that order persisted even in the midst of chaos. During periods of calm, when the ship might drift motionless on glassy seas for days or weeks, the bell's regular marking of time prevented the psychological disorientation that could result from the suspension of normal progress and activity. The training of young sailors in the proper care and ringing of ship's bells became an integral part of maritime education, representing not just the acquisition of technical skills, but initiation into the cultural traditions that defined life at sea. Boys who joined ship's crews as apprentices learned that the responsibility for maintaining and ringing the bell was both an honor and a test of their reliability and dedication to the welfare of the ship and its crew. The precision required for proper bell ringing taught young sailors the importance of attention to detail and exact timing that would prove essential in all aspects of seamanship. The ritual aspects of bell duty connected new sailors to the long tradition of men who had served before them, creating a sense of continuity and belonging that helped ease the difficult transition from land-based to maritime life. The evolution of bell technology during the Industrial Revolution led to the development of mechanical striking systems that could maintain accurate timekeeping even when human bell ringers were unavailable or incapacitated. These automated systems used clockwork mechanisms to strike bells at precise intervals, ensuring that the ship's temporal rhythm continued uninterrupted regardless of weather conditions or crew emergencies. However, many sailors preferred the traditional manual system, arguing that the human element in bell ringing provided subtle variations in tone and timing that conveyed information about the ringer's alertness and the general condition of the ship. The debate between automated and manual bell systems reflected broader questions about the role of human skill and judgment in an increasingly mechanized maritime industry. The social hierarchy aboard ship was often reflected in the bell-ringing duties, with senior sailors assigned responsibility for the most important time signals, while junior crew members handled routine watch changes and meal times. The captain's bell, used to announce the commander's presence on deck or to call officers to important meetings, required the most skilled ringer and was considered one of the most prestigious duties aboard any vessel. These hierarchical aspects of bell duty created opportunities for advancement and recognition within the ship's social structure, providing incentives for sailors to develop their skills and demonstrate their reliability and commitment to maritime tradition. The competition for bell-ringing assignments helped maintain high standards of performance and ensured that the ship's timekeeping system operated with maximum efficiency and precision. The adaptation of maritime bell systems to different cultural contexts as global trade expanded reveals the remarkable flexibility and universality of this fundamental maritime practice. Ships from different nations developed their own variations on the basic 8-bell system, incorporating elements of their own musical and temporal traditions while maintaining the essential functionality that made the system work effectively for international communication and coordination. Chinese junks developed bell patterns that reflected traditional Chinese music and timekeeping practices, while Mediterranean vessels incorporated rhythms derived from local folk traditions and religious practices. These cultural adaptations enriched the global maritime bell tradition while demonstrating its fundamental compatibility with diverse human approaches to understanding and organizing time. The documentation of maritime bell practices in ships' logs and official records provides historians with detailed insights into the daily rhythms of life aboard sailing vessels, revealing patterns of work, rest, and social interaction that would otherwise be lost to historical memory. These records show how bell time structured not just work schedules but social relationships, meal times, religious observances, and recreational activities that helped maintain crew morale during long voyages. The careful recording of bell signals in official logs also served legal and commercial purposes, providing evidence of proper timekeeping practices that could be important in disputes over crew wages, cargo delivery schedules, and navigation accuracy. These documentary aspects of maritime bell tradition contributed to the development of more systematic approaches to ship management and maritime law. The influence of maritime bell traditions on the development of public timekeeping systems in major cities demonstrates the broader cultural impact of seafaring practices on human civilization. Many of the world's great port cities adopted civic bell systems that were directly inspired by maritime practices, creating urban temporal environments that reflected the rhythms and values of seafaring culture. The famous bells of London, Venice, and other major trading centers developed their own distinctive patterns and schedules that coordinated urban activities with the arrival and departure of merchant vessels, creating temporal links between maritime and terrestrial commerce that persisted for centuries. These urban bell systems served multiple functions, providing public timekeeping services while also celebrating the maritime heritage that had made their cities prosperous and influential. The role of ships' bells in maritime religious practices reveals another important dimension of their cultural significance, as sailors incorporated these essential timekeeping instruments into their spiritual lives and religious observances. Sunday services aboard ship were announced by distinctive bell patterns that differed from normal watch signals, creating acoustic markers that separated sacred time from the ordinary rhythms of work and duty. Prayer times during daily religious observances were also marked by special bell signals, helping to maintain spiritual discipline and community worship, even in the challenging environment of life at sea. These religious applications of maritime bell tradition reflected the deep integration of practical and spiritual concerns that characterized traditional seafaring culture, where survival and salvation were understood to be intimately connected. The technical challenges of maintaining accurate timekeeping aboard ships in rough weather led to the development of specialized bell mounting systems that could function effectively regardless of the vessel's motion or position. Master shipwrights learned to design bell installations that would ring clearly whether the ship was heeled over in a strong wind, pitching in heavy seas, or rolling in oceanic swells. These mounting systems required careful attention to the physics of sound production and transmission, ensuring that the bell's voice would carry throughout the ship even when competing with the noise of wind, waves, and creaking rigging. The engineering solutions developed for maritime bell installations influenced later developments in acoustic design and sound transmission technology, contributing to advances that extended far beyond maritime applications. The psychological impact of losing or damaging the ship's bell during a voyage reveals just how central these instruments had become to maritime life and sailor morale. Historical accounts describe the devastating effects on crew psychology when bells were lost overboard during storms or damaged beyond repair during combat or accidents. Ships that lost their bells experienced increased difficulty in maintaining discipline and coordination, with sailors reporting feelings of disorientation and anxiety that persisted until replacement bells could be obtained. These accounts demonstrate that maritime bells had become far more than mere timekeeping devices, evolving into symbols of order, continuity, and hope that were essential to the psychological welfare of men living in the challenging environment of the sea. The development of international standards for maritime bell signals during the age of global exploration created one of the first examples of successful international cooperation in establishing common practices that transcended national boundaries and cultural differences. Maritime nations recognized that standardized bell signals were essential for safe navigation and effective communication between vessels from different countries, leading to diplomatic agreements that established universal practices for time signals, emergency communications, and navigational warnings. These early maritime treaties served as models for later international agreements on a wide range of technical and safety issues, demonstrating the practical benefits of cooperation and standardization in addressing challenges that affected all participants in global maritime commerce. The transformation of maritime bell traditions during the transition from wooden sailing ships to iron and steel steamships reveals how deeply ingrained practices could adapt to revolutionary changes in shipbuilding technology while preserving their essential function and cultural significance. As you continue to drift deeper into peaceful rest, imagine the gentle vibrations of those early steam vessels, where the familiar bronze voice of the ship's bell now competed with the rhythmic pulse of steam engines and the whisper of coal smoke rising from tall funnels into the evening sky. The bell's ancient authority remained undiminished by these technological marvels, continuing to mark time and coordinate human activity, even as the very nature of sea travel underwent fundamental transformation. The steamship's bell spoke with the same bronze voice that had guided sailing vessels across centuries of ocean voyages, creating a bridge of continuity that connected the age of sail to the industrial era, while preserving the accumulated wisdom of generations of seafaring experience. The expansion of global maritime trade during the 19th century created new challenges for bell-based communication systems, as ships from increasingly diverse cultural backgrounds needed to understand and respond to each other's time signals and emergency communications. The development of standardized international bell codes became a pressing necessity as merchant vessels from Europe, Asia, and the Americas began to share the world's major shipping lanes in unprecedented numbers. Maritime authorities in major ports worked together to establish common practices that would allow ships flying different flags to coordinate their movements safely and efficiently, recognizing that the peaceful flow of international commerce depended on reliable communication systems that could transcend linguistic and cultural barriers. These efforts to standardize maritime bell signals represented some of the earliest examples of successful international technical cooperation, demonstrating that practical necessity could overcome national rivalries and cultural differences when the benefits of cooperation were clear and immediate. The role of ships' bells in naval warfare reveals another fascinating dimension of their maritime significance, where the familiar rhythms of peacetime timekeeping were adapted to meet the urgent demands of combat operations and military discipline. Naval vessels developed elaborate bell codes that could communicate battle readiness, tactical maneuvers, and damage reports without revealing sensitive information to enemy observers who might be listening to the signals. The precise timing required for coordinated naval operations made accurate timekeeping even more critical than in merchant service, leading to the development of specialized military bell protocols that emphasized speed, clarity, and security of communication. Naval bell ringers received extensive training in these combat applications, learning to maintain their duties even under the stress of battle conditions where accuracy and reliability could mean the difference between victory and defeat. The influence of maritime bell traditions on the development of lighthouse and coastal navigation systems demonstrates how seafaring practices shaped the entire infrastructure of maritime safety and navigation. Lighthouse keepers adopted bell signals as backup communication systems that could function when fog obscured their light beacons, creating acoustic navigation aids that complemented visual signals and provided redundant safety systems for ships approaching dangerous coasts. The distinctive bell patterns used by different lighthouses became as familiar to experienced mariners as the unique light sequences that identified each beacon, creating a comprehensive system of acoustic landmarks that helped ships navigate safely in conditions where visual navigation was impossible. These coastal bell systems extended the reach of maritime timekeeping practices onto land, creating networks of coordinated signals that connected ships at sea with shore-based navigation facilities. The study of maritime bell acoustics led to significant advances in the understanding of sound transmission, over water, contributing to the development of more effective communication systems for both maritime and terrestrial applications. Scientists and engineers studied how weather conditions, sea state, and atmospheric pressure affected the carrying power and clarity of bell signals, leading to improvements in bell design and mounting systems that maximize their effectiveness under various conditions. These acoustic studies revealed the complex relationships between sound frequency, environmental conditions, and human perception that influence the effectiveness of audio communication systems, contributing to advances in telecommunications technology that extended far beyond maritime applications. The practical experience of generations of sailors in using bell signals under challenging conditions provided valuable data for these scientific investigations, demonstrating how traditional practices could inform and inspire technological innovation. A cultural exchange facilitated by maritime bell traditions, as ships from different civilizations encountered each other in ports around the world, created opportunities for the sharing of musical and temporal practices that enriched the global maritime heritage. Chinese mariners introduced European sailors to bell patterns based on traditional Chinese musical scales, while Mediterranean sailors shared rhythmic traditions derived from ancient Greek and Roman maritime practices. These cultural exchanges led to the development of hybrid bell traditions that incorporated elements from multiple maritime cultures, creating new forms of shipboard music and timekeeping that reflected the increasingly international character of global maritime commerce. The fusion of different bell traditions in major international ports created cosmopolitan maritime cultures that celebrated diversity while maintaining the functional unity essential for safe and efficient navigation. The development of precision timepieces during the 18th and 19th centuries might have threatened the dominance of bell-based timekeeping systems aboard ships, but instead led to the creation of more sophisticated integrated systems that combined the accuracy of mechanical chronometers with the practical advantages of acoustic time signals. Ships' chronometers provided the precise time measurements needed for celestial navigation and position fixing, while bells continued to coordinate daily activities and communicate time information throughout the vessel. This complementary relationship between different timekeeping technologies demonstrated the enduring value of bell systems for shipboard communication and organization, even as more accurate alternatives became available for specialized applications. The integration of chronometers and bells created redundant timekeeping systems that improved both accuracy and reliability, ensuring that ships could maintain proper time even if individual components of the system failed. The training programs developed by maritime academies and merchant marine schools for teaching proper bell procedures reflect the continuing importance of these traditional practices even as shipping technology became increasingly sophisticated. Students learned not only the technical aspects of bell signals, but also their historical development and cultural significance, ensuring that new generations of mariners understood the deeper meanings embedded in these ancient practices. The curriculum for bell training included practical exercises in different weather conditions and emergency situations, preparing future officers and sailors to maintain effective communication systems under the full range of conditions they might encounter during their careers at sea. These educational programs preserved traditional maritime knowledge while adapting it to meet the requirements of modern shipping operations, creating bridges between ancient wisdom and contemporary practice. The economic impact of reliable maritime timekeeping systems on global trade cannot be overstated, as accurate coordination of shipping schedules became increasingly important for the efficient operation of international commerce. The ability to predict and coordinate arrival and departure times allowed merchants to optimize their operations, reducing costs and improving service to customers around the world. Maritime bell systems played a crucial role in this economic development by providing reliable methods for coordinating activities aboard ship and communicating with shore-based facilities, ensuring that vessels could maintain the precise schedules required for profitable operation in competitive global markets. The economic benefits of effective maritime timekeeping created strong incentives for continued investment in bell technology and training, ensuring that these traditional practices remained viable even as alternative communication systems became available. The preservation of maritime bell traditions in the age of radio communication demonstrates the enduring value of redundant systems and the wisdom of maintaining traditional practices alongside newer technologies. Even as wireless telegraphy revolutionized ship-to-ship and ship-to-shore communication, experienced mariners recognized that bell signals remained essential for internal ship communication and emergency situations where electronic systems might fail. The reliability and simplicity of bell systems made them ideal backup communication methods that could function without external power sources or complex maintenance requirements, providing crucial redundancy that improved overall safety and operational reliability. This practical approach to technological change preserved valuable traditional knowledge while embracing beneficial innovations, creating more robust and flexible maritime communication systems. The role of women in maritime bell traditions, though often overlooked in traditional histories, reveals important aspects of how these practices evolved and were preserved across generations. Women who lived in maritime communities often served as keepers of bell-making traditions, preserving the specialized knowledge required for casting and maintaining the bronze instruments that were so essential to seafaring life. The wives and daughters of sailors learned to interpret bell signals from ships in harbor, understanding the coded messages that communicated information about voyages, cargo, and crew welfare. Female lighthouse keepers maintained coastal bell systems that provided navigation aids for ships approaching dangerous waters, demonstrating skills and dedication that were essential for maritime safety. These contributions by women to maritime bell traditions represent an important but often unrecognized aspect of seafaring culture that deserves greater historical attention and recognition. The psychological studies conducted by maritime physicians during long voyages revealed the complex relationships between bell rhythms, sleep patterns, and crew mental health that had developed through centuries of practical experience at sea. Doctors observed that sailors who served on ships with well-maintained bell systems showed better adjustment to maritime life and fewer symptoms of the psychological disorders that could affect men during extended periods away from land. The regular rhythm of bell signals appeared to provide psychological anchoring that helped maintain mental stability in the challenging environment of ocean travel, where the absence of familiar terrestrial landmarks and rhythms could lead to disorientation and depression. These medical observations provided scientific validation for traditional maritime practices that had developed through practical experience, demonstrating how accumulated wisdom could anticipate scientific understanding by centuries. The artistic inspiration provided by maritime bell traditions influenced composers, poets, and visual artists who sought to capture the romance and adventure of seafaring life in their creative works. The distinctive rhythms of ships' bells appeared in musical compositions that celebrated maritime themes, while poets used bell imagery to explore questions of time, journey, and the relationship between human temporality and the eternal rhythms of the natural world. Visual artists depicted ships' bells in paintings and sculptures that captured the essential tools and symbols of maritime life, creating artistic representations that preserved and celebrated seafaring culture for audiences who might never experience life at sea. These artistic interpretations of maritime bell traditions helped communicate the cultural significance of seafaring practices to broader audiences, ensuring that maritime heritage remained part of general cultural awareness even as direct experience of traditional sailing became less common. The technical innovations in bell manufacturing during the Industrial Revolution led to the production of instruments with improved tonal qualities and greater durability, allowing ships to carry bells that could function effectively throughout extended voyages without requiring frequent maintenance or replacement. Advances in metallurgy and precision casting techniques created bells with more consistent acoustic properties and better resistance to the corrosive effects of salt water and marine environments. These improvements in bell quality contributed to more effective shipboard communication systems and reduced the maintenance burden on crews who were already managing complex and demanding operational requirements. The industrial production of high-quality ships' bells also made these essential instruments more widely available to smaller vessels and merchant operators who might previously have been unable to afford properly made bells for their ships. The integration of maritime bell systems with emerging electrical and mechanical technologies during the late 19th and early 20th centuries created hybrid communication systems that combine the reliability of traditional acoustic signals with the precision and automation possible through industrial innovation. Electric bell systems allowed for more precise timing and remote operation, while mechanical striking mechanisms ensured that time signals would continue, even if human operators were unavailable or incapacitated. These technological integrations demonstrated how traditional maritime practices could evolve and adapt to incorporate new capabilities while preserving their essential functions and cultural significance. The hybrid systems that emerged from this technological fusion provided greater reliability and functionality than either traditional or modern approaches could achieve independently, illustrating the value of thoughtful integration rather than wholesale replacement of established practices. The documentation of maritime bell traditions by folklorists and ethnographers during the early 20th century preserved detailed records of regional variations and cultural adaptations that might otherwise have been lost as traditional seafaring practices gave way to modern industrial shipping. These scholarly investigations revealed the rich diversity of bell traditions that had developed in different maritime regions, documenting unique practices and local innovations that reflected the creativity and adaptability of seafaring communities around the world. The preservation of this cultural knowledge in academic collections and archives ensured that future generations would have access to the accumulated wisdom of traditional maritime practices, providing resources for historians, anthropologists, and maritime enthusiasts seeking to understand the full complexity and richness of seafaring heritage. The legacy of maritime bell traditions in the modern world reveals how ancient seafaring practices continue to influence contemporary life in ways both obvious and subtle, creating connections between past and present that bridge the gap between traditional maritime culture and today's technologically sophisticated shipping industry. As you settle into the deepest levels of relaxation, your breathing slow and steady like the gentle rhythm of waves against a distant shore, consider how the bronze voice of ship's bells continues to echo through time, carrying with it the accumulated wisdom of countless generations of sailors who learned to measure their lives not by the artificial divisions of clock time, but by the natural rhythm of work and rest that the sea itself seemed to demand. Even in our modern age of satellite navigation and digital communication, the fundamental human need for temporal structure and acoustic coordination that gave birth to maritime bell traditions continues to shape how we organize our lives and understand our relationship to time itself. The preservation of historic ships' bells in maritime museums around the world provides tangible connections to the seafaring heritage that shaped human civilization, allowing visitors to experience directly the weight, craftsmanship, and acoustic properties of instruments that once governed life aboard the great sailing vessels of history. These preserved bells serve as more than mere artifacts. They function as time capsules that contain within their bronze the echoes of thousands of voyages, countless watches stood by faithful sailors, and the accumulated experience of maritime communities that developed some of humanity's most effective methods for coordinating group activities under challenging conditions. Museum curators have learned to present these bells not just as examples of maritime technology, but as symbols of human ingenuity and adaptation, demonstrating how practical necessity combined with cultural creativity to produce solutions that were both functionally effective and deeply meaningful to the people who use them daily in their working lives. The influence of maritime bell rhythms on modern timekeeping practices can be traced through the development of industrial work schedules, where the division of labor into regular intervals marked by acoustic signals owes much to the organizational principles first developed aboard sailing ships. Factory bells, school bells, and civic bells all reflect the understanding that coordinated human activity requires reliable temporal markers that can be heard and understood by large groups of people working together toward common goals. The shift systems used in modern industrial operations echo the watch rotations that were coordinated by ships' bells, demonstrating how maritime innovations in human resource management found applications far beyond their original seafaring context. These connections between maritime and terrestrial timekeeping reveal the broader influence of seafaring culture on the development of modern organizational methods and workplace management practices. The revival of interest in traditional maritime skills during the late 20th and early 21st centuries has led to renewed appreciation for bell traditions among recreational sailors, tall ship operators, and maritime education programs that seek to preserve and transmit the accumulated wisdom of traditional seamanship. Sailing schools that operate traditional vessels have discovered that teaching proper bell procedures provides students with deeper understanding of maritime culture and more effective methods for coordinating group activities aboard ship. The discipline required for accurate bell ringing develops attention to detail and respect for precision that proves valuable in all aspects of seamanship. while the historical knowledge associated with bell traditions connects modern sailors to the cultural heritage of their maritime predecessors. These educational programs demonstrate how traditional practices can continue to provide value even in contexts where they are no longer strictly necessary for operational purposes. The acoustic properties of ships' bells have inspired researchers in fields ranging from architectural acoustics to urban planning, where the principles of sound transmission and environmental adaptation, developed through centuries of maritime experience, provide insights for solving contemporary communication challenges. Studies of how bell sounds propagate through different atmospheric conditions have contributed to the design of public address systems, emergency warning networks, and urban soundscapes that must function effectively in complex acoustic environments. The traditional knowledge embedded in maritime bell practices offers practical solutions for modern problems involving acoustic communication, demonstrating how historical practices can inform contemporary technological development when their underlying principles are properly understood and applied. The meditative and therapeutic qualities of ship's bell sounds have found applications in modern wellness practices, where the deep, resonant tones of bronze bells are used to promote relaxation, reduce stress, and facilitate meditation and mindfulness exercises. The regular rhythm of bell signals that once provided psychological stability for sailors during long voyages has been adapted for use in therapeutic settings where patients benefit from the calming effects of predictable acoustic patterns and the sense of temporal structure that bell rhythms provide. These modern applications of traditional maritime bell practices demonstrate how ancient wisdom about the relationship between sound, rhythm, and human well-being can find new relevance in contemporary contexts where people seek relief from the stress and disorientation of rapidly changing technological environments. The environmental considerations surrounding traditional maritime bell use reveal how historical practices often embodied principles of sustainability and resource conservation that are increasingly relevant in our contemporary world. Ships' bells were designed to last for decades or even centuries of service, representing approaches to manufacturing and maintenance that prioritized durability and repairability over disposability and replacement. The use of renewable materials and traditional craftsmanship techniques in bell production created instruments that could be maintained and restored indefinitely, reducing waste and preserving valuable resources. These historical examples of sustainable design provide models for contemporary manufacturing practices that seek to reduce environmental impact while maintaining high standards of quality and functionality. The social and cultural functions of maritime bell traditions extend beyond their practical applications to encompass broader questions about community, tradition, and the transmission of cultural knowledge across generations. The bell served as a focal point for shipboard community life, providing shared experiences and common reference points that helped create bonds of mutual understanding and cooperation among crew members who might otherwise have little in common. The rituals and ceremonies associated with bell use created opportunities for the expression of maritime culture and the reinforcement of social values that were essential for maintaining order and morale during the challenging conditions of ocean voyages. These community-building functions of maritime bell traditions offer insights for contemporary efforts to strengthen social cohesion and preserve cultural heritage in increasingly fragmented and rapidly changing societies. The technological evolution of maritime communication systems demonstrates how traditional practices like bell signals continue to provide valuable backup capabilities and redundant safety systems. Even in an age of sophisticated electronic navigation and communication equipment, modern ships maintain bell systems not just for historical reasons, but because they provide reliable communication methods that function independently of electrical power, electronic systems, and satellite networks that might fail during emergencies or extreme weather conditions. The simplicity and reliability of acoustic signals ensure that basic communication and coordination capabilities remain available even when more sophisticated systems are compromised, providing crucial safety margins that can prevent disasters and save lives. This continued practical relevance of traditional maritime bell systems illustrates how ancient wisdom about redundancy and reliability remains applicable in contemporary technological contexts. The artistic and musical legacy of maritime bell traditions continues to inspire contemporary composers, sound artists, and musicians who draw upon the rich acoustic heritage of seafaring culture to create new works that celebrate and reinterpret maritime themes for modern audiences. The distinctive rhythms and tonal qualities of ships' bells provide source material for musical compositions that evoke the romance and adventure of life at sea, while exploring deeper themes about time, journey, and the human relationship to the natural world. These contemporary artistic interpretations of maritime bell traditions help maintain cultural connections to seafaring heritage, while demonstrating how historical practices can continue to inspire creativity and cultural expression in new contexts and media. The scientific study of maritime bell traditions has contributed to broader understanding of human temporal perception, group coordination, and the psychological effects of acoustic environments on behavior and well-being. Researchers have documented how the regular rhythm of bell signals helps synchronize group activities and maintain social cohesion under challenging conditions, providing insights that have applications in fields ranging from organizational psychology to urban planning. The accumulated knowledge about how acoustic signals affect human behavior in maritime contexts offers valuable data for designing environments and systems that support effective coordination and cooperation in contemporary settings where large groups of people must work together toward common goals. The globalization of maritime commerce has created new opportunities for the preservation and transmission of traditional bell practices as ships from different cultural backgrounds continue to encounter each other in ports around the world. International maritime organizations have worked to document and preserve regional variations in bell traditions, recognizing these practices as important components of global maritime heritage that deserve protection and continued study. The cultural exchange facilitated by modern global shipping creates opportunities for the sharing and adaptation of traditional practices, ensuring that maritime bell traditions continue to evolve and develop even as the technological context of seafaring undergoes continued transformation. The educational value of maritime bell traditions extends beyond their historical interest to encompass broader lessons about human adaptation, cultural innovation, and the development of effective organizational practices under challenging conditions. The study of how seafaring communities developed and refined bell-based communication systems provides insights into processes of cultural evolution and technological development that have applications in many contemporary contexts. The principles of reliability, redundancy, and simplicity that guided the development of maritime bell systems offer valuable lessons for designers of modern communication and coordination systems who seek to create robust solutions that can function effectively under diverse and challenging conditions. The therapeutic applications of bell sounds in modern healthcare settings demonstrate how traditional maritime practices can find new relevance in contemporary contexts where their original functions may no longer be necessary, but their underlying benefits remain valuable. Hospitals and treatment centers have discovered that the regular rhythm and soothing tones of bell signals can help reduce patient anxiety, improve sleep quality, and facilitate healing processes that benefit from structured acoustic environments. These medical applications of traditional maritime bell practices illustrate how ancient wisdom about the relationship between sound and human well-being can inform contemporary approaches to healthcare and wellness that seek to integrate traditional knowledge with modern medical understanding. The conservation efforts surrounding historic ships' bells reflect broader concerns about preserving maritime heritage and maintaining connections to the cultural traditions that shaped human civilization. Museums, historical societies, and maritime preservation organizations work to maintain and restore historic bells not just as artifacts but as functional instruments that can continue to serve their original purposes while educating contemporary audiences about traditional maritime practices. These conservation efforts require specialized knowledge about historical manufacturing techniques, traditional materials, and the acoustic properties that made maritime bells effective for their original purposes, creating opportunities for the preservation and transmission of traditional craftsmanship skills that might otherwise be lost. As we reach the end of our journey through the fascinating world of maritime bells and their role in the measurement of time at sea, allow yourself to rest completely in the knowledge that these ancient practices continue to echo through our modern world in ways both subtle and profound. The bronze voice that once marked time for countless sailors on endless voyages continues to speak to us across the centuries, carrying with it the accumulated wisdom of generations who learned to find order and meaning in the vast uncertainty of the ocean. Let the gentle rhythm of imagined bells carry you now into the deepest rest, where dreams of distant shores and peaceful waters await, and where the ancient harmony between human time and natural rhythm continues to provide comfort and structure for all who listen carefully to the eternal conversation between sea and sky, between tradition and innovation, between the temporal and the timeless that defines our enduring relationship with the mysterious and life-giving ocean that surrounds our small planet in the vastness of space. Rest now in the peace of 8 bells, the completion of the watch, the end of duty, and the beginning of the deep sleep that comes to those who have faithfully kept their vigil and earned their rest through service to something larger than themselves. The bell's voice fades into silence, but its message of order, continuity, and hope continues to resonate in the quiet chambers of the heart, where the rhythm of time itself beats in harmony with the eternal pulse of the sea.